Michele, I'm going to switch it back now into actually the context of bargaining. And you mentioned in your last response about, entitlements and rights and how, having women in those roles can have a positive effect. But today, this is all about us preparing for our bargain at Cbus, which is around the corner. What have you seen in your role at the ACTU in terms of what are the leading entitlements that you're seeing for women in other agreements at the moment? Like, what's cutting edge, what's progressive, what are other unions doing that are really leading the way for working women?
Well, I'd start by saying, firstly, congratulations to the FSU and some of the leading role you've been playing in this, and some of the wins that you've been negotiating around issues like family and domestic violence leave. I was pulled up the other day about we were having a discussion about our campaigning around this and what we can do to try and win it as a universal right, and was reminded that it was you that won that unlimited access to family and domestic violence leave that I think at the Commonwealth Bank, and that's fantastic. Like, that is world leading. So I want to congratulate you for that. And we see a lot of effort going into winning paid family and domestic violence leave in agreements. The other thing, I think that's some of the sort of cutting edge changes that unions are leading in negotiations around agreements are things to do with enshrined rights about part-time work and responsibility and carers' responsibility and work. So having enshrined rights about being able to move to part-time employment when you have responsibilities in relation to caring or other aspects of your life, and with a guaranteed right to move back into full-time permanent employment when that changes. So I think that's a really important thing for women, like being able to not just be at the whim of whether anyone thinks, oh, this job maybe can or can't be done part-time. And if you move to part-time, you're giving up on the notion of ever having a right to get back into full-time if you want it. So I think there's some great clauses and work being done. In fact, the SDA have done some good work on that as well, around that right to go back to permanent work once you've no longer need to be working part-time. I think clauses that are recognising the superannuation gap and looking at whether there's additional superannuation payments that go to women to try and address the difference between women and men in that. There's some good clauses, like the Victorian Public Sector Agreement has got some new pay equity clauses about how you have a collaborative approach to achieving gender pay equity. So structures and processes that recognising some of the things you said, Julia, that it's complex, that it's often the hidden bonuses and elements of the discretionary pay that cause the problem. So having clauses that allow that to be properly unpacked in a collaborative way, and then put in place what are we going to do to address it. So I think they're really important, and I can imagine in your industry and in superannuation in particular would be really a critical thing. There's some clauses around people's rights to do actually HACSU at the moment and negotiating about paid leave for reproductive leave. So this is about recognising people's issues to do with things like endometriosis, IVF treatment, like just sort of acknowledging that there's elements to do with women's reproductive capacity that impacts on their health, but also on the type of leave they might have. There's parts of the world where there's long established menstrual leave, it surprises you in some of the countries there are, but, really just understanding the impact of that on women and what might be the type of leave that would need to be put in place. There's also some interesting, I think, clauses that deal with that, how we deal with the right to permanency. So people moving out of casual into permanent positions. So not just conversion, but conversion's important, but about really building in limitations on the amount of insecure work and how we give people a genuine path to permanency rather than get them stuck in long-term casual and insecure roles. Again, I think that matters for every worker, but it matters particularly for women. Some of our bargaining rules, of course, restrict that, we should be able to bargain about absolutely everything, but one of the things in Australia's bargaining laws is that it's got these ridiculous limitations on some of the things we can bargain around, but there's ways we're getting around that.
Thanks, Michelle. We are definitely looking to use this agreement at Cbus to really, I suppose, future-proof this agreement and make it as progressive as we can. We would love Cbus to kind of really lead the way on some of the things that you've just outlined in terms of what are these new initiatives, what are other unions thinking about when we think about reproductive leave or the gender equity provisions that the CPSU are looking at. I think all of that's really important to us, and as a movement, learning from each other and taking the best bits and dropping it in at Cbus is ultimately what we want to achieve here. It's interesting that you call out the FSU on the work that we've done on paid family and domestic violence leave. Like, we're really proud of that work. We think we are industry leading in many respects in terms of what we've achieved at CBA, that's for sure, unlimited. But for our members on the call, you're going to be really pleased to know that Emily Holm, who's going to be our campaign lead for Cbus, was our campaign lead at CBA, and she brings all of that experience to the table. And we had to actually twist their arms and almost publicly embarrass them, Michelle, because whilst they made a public announcement about being a very good employer when it came to DV and supporting their workforce and having an unlimited paid arrangement, when it came to the negotiation, they wanted to have a private provision, which was just for 20 days. And Emily and the crew wouldn't stand for that in the negotiation. And we were successful in getting them to agree that what they say publicly is what they should stand behind for the purposes of thetheir agreement. So we've achieved that, and it's codified, but they're the kinds of things that we'll want to now replicate out in places like Cbus. So we're in very good hands with Nicole and Emily leading this campaign, that's for sure.